I was reminded of something just now that inspired me to start this speech right away, because this is something that is absolutely critical to understand for advocates of software freedom. It is the issue of the schools and their use of software and all the licenses there, which is to say that if schools use proprietary software, that is of course a problem, given that advocates of software freedom would of course want that people use free Libre software. I say it is absolutely imperative that people target the schools as a very important target audience, so to speak, because the schools are where people are exposed to computers, basically. And of course the social role of the school is to teach the people, so that's where the people go to learn and all that sort of thing. So of course, if the students, they get trapped in the proprietary world in the school, and for the most part in most places school is mandatory, that is of course an absolute evil that some state would enforce people to go to school and then teach them to be dependent on proprietary software. So that's not even something that's voluntary, where out there in the world in general, where people who are not students, like, the use of proprietary software is optional, it's voluntary, it's choice. It's a choice they make. So talking to people and telling them about software freedom is that software freedom in that this is why you should use it and this is why you should avoid proprietary software. Those people out there in the world, they can make the decision for themselves, they can stop using proprietary software. But people in schools, they can't do that, they don't have a choice. If you are forced to go to school and the school forces you to do some tasks on some computer that runs proprietary software and that sort of thing, then you don't really have a choice in that sense. So that is of course absolutely evil, because there the proprietary software is imposed on the people. That is more evil. That is a bigger evil than just the mere creation of proprietary software and offering it to people, selling proprietary software. Although that is of course also evil, the fact that the school, a school system, a state institution, enforces and imposes the software on the people, that is even more evil. Because at least people who are not in some school, they have the choice to make for themselves. They can choose not to purchase proprietary software. They can choose to avoid all that proprietary nonsense. They have the choice that they can make for themselves. So, of course, with the school's social responsibility to teach people, it is not only immoral to force them to use proprietary software, but it of course goes against the spirit of education in general to use proprietary software specifically, because proprietary software by its very design is against sharing, which is of course what the spirit of education is all about. The sharing of knowledge and skills, that is what schools are for. So proprietary software denying that, by denying the access to the source code to learn from it, so that denies the sharing of skills and useful knowledge, but also denies sharing as a concept in general, because proprietary software can be shared. So of course proprietary software violates the spirit of education in more ways than one. So out of that reason alone, schools should not use proprietary software. So it is absolutely imperative that schools be targeted by advocates of software freedom. They should be one of the most highly targeted and highly discussed topics in the free software movement. The free software movement, really, a big portion of it should be discussing the schools, but I hardly see people talking about schools in the free software movement. When it comes to people on the internet, and of course the big content creators on some video sharing websites, they hardly ever even mention the concept of a school. And that is very unfortunate, because you are entirely missing the most important target audience for GNU plus Linux related information. For example, when it comes to these GNU plus Linux content creators, if they promote the operating system to the general public, to the crowds, then it's not like that's a bad thing to do. Of course it's not. So I'm not calling out to the people to stop making all the content and all that sort of thing that they are doing right now. But what I am doing is calling to them to introduce the topic of the schools and talk about the schools more. It should be something that is discussed all the time, everywhere where people who talk about the free software movement go. The topic of schools should follow them. So yeah, what you need to do is try your best at talking about the school issues. Well, what would that mean in practice? Well, obviously, if you are a parent of a child who goes to school, complain to the school if they use proprietary software. And if you are a teacher in a school, refuse to teach proprietary software and bring up the issue of the software freedom to whoever manages the schools and all that sort of thing. Of course, political activities would be always necessary, because schools are fundamentally driven by the state. They are state institutions, so if the people are supposed to have the power over the state, it is of course absolutely relevant that the people try to exercise some political influence over the state. So, whatever such means, you should really try to do something about the schools. So now I'm going to tell you about a story. I was talking to a teacher of an information and communication technology vocational school about their use of Windows, and I asked them why is it that they use Microsoft's Windows, and the response that was given, of course, is the fact that but it's what the businesses use and whatever is what's used by the companies out there and all that sort of thing. So like the idea is that the school is supposed to teach the students something that's like useful out there in the real world and all that sort of thing. Now, of course, while that seemingly looks great when you look at it and not think about it too deeply, the obvious answer that has to be given to that, and the one that I gave, is that, well, that's not really true, in the sense that the companies and the businesses and all those things, really what they use is what the school teaches the students, because the students, when they are taught in the school, they are taught those systems, so those are the systems that the students are familiar with when they leave the school. So, of course, the businesses would naturally try to implement such systems that the students are already familiar with. So, really, it's actually the school that is imprinting that on the people, and not the businesses that imprint that on the school, because it's the school that exposes the students or the people to those systems first. And not only is that the case, that the school introduces them to the ideas first, but the school also has the social responsibility to take care of those people, those students. And it is the responsibility, therefore, of the school to not mistreat the students and to trap them in dependency of proprietary software. And most certainly not steal their freedom and give it away to the companies who created the proprietary software that is used in the school. It would be a mistake to think that there is some infinite loop where the schools use some proprietary operating system because that's what the businesses use, and the businesses use it because that's what the school teaches. That's not really the case, and even if there was some effect like that going on, well, it's not like that's a good thing, and I say it should be broken. But the thing is, it's not really happening. That's not what's happening at all, because the schools are the ones who started. The schools are the ones that expose the students to the operating systems. The schools are the ones that require the students to do their tasks and force them to use certain systems and all that sort of thing. The schools are the ones who do that. And this extends to other areas and not just the specific information and communications technology vocational school. Not just computer science related things. This applies to all the schools in general. If you just take some arbitrary random thing, some school, let's just say that it's some high school and they teach math, let's say, and then the high school that teaches math, if they have some course on the internet, they use some computer things to do those math courses or whatever, and then they have some arbitrary requirements to use some specific operating systems and some specific web browsers to complete those courses on the internet or whatever to teach those math subjects. That is not related to computer science. That is not them using Microsoft's Windows because that's what the businesses use. No, that's just them imposing Microsoft Windows on the students for no reason. So that's how arbitrary it gets, where learning math requires the use of Microsoft Windows. And also this example, I did not make it up, and actually there are schools. Actually, I'm not sure if it was a high school or a university, but that's not really an important difference. There's a distinction without a difference. The point is that if a school requires that people use some certain operating systems and all that sort of thing, whether it's in the school or on the computers of the students, their personal computers, their personal property that are computers, whether it's used in the school or outside of the school or whatever, as long as it's something that the school requires them to use, the school is imposing that on the people. And it is this act of them imposing that on the people that is the injustice that needs to be fought against. Because they are acting as instruments of evil. They are really just perpetuating these systems, these operating systems like Microsoft Windows, but it doesn't have to be Microsoft Windows. It can be any proprietary operating system. They are all proprietary software. And it is specifically the requirement to use proprietary software that is the bad thing here. Now, of course, it should be possible to teach math without the use of computers at all in general. So that's of course always an option, but I don't think that is necessary. I'm not advocating for the removal of computers from schools. That is not necessary, and the specific focus of this speech is the fact that proprietary software is what's evil. Requiring the students to use computers is not really such a problem, and like computers being used in the school, that's not really an issue. I don't really see that as an issue, and it's not really relevant to the speech either, and it wouldn't be the correct solution to remove them. So really it's just the proprietary software that's the problem, and that's specifically what needs to be focused on. Universally, in every school, there should be a rule that absolutely no proprietary software is used in the education. It should be a requirement by law when it comes to all the institutions that claim to be schools. No school should be allowed to use proprietary software, and that is absolute. And realizing this is necessary to actually carry out such a plan or such a goal. And it is a goal that is absolutely essential to the free software movement, because the schools are an environment very much specifically focusing on the concepts of learning and sharing knowledge and skills. But in general, the sharing as a concept in general multiple times, the spirit of goodwill comes from people sharing and helping each other, and the schools as an institution that helps people learn, it has a social responsibility to promote that spirit of goodwill. The schools should not be instruments of evil to impose the use of proprietary software that denies the people's freedom. Like, that's just wrong. It should not be possible for that to happen. Something has gone seriously wrong in a society if schools impose injustices like that onto the students. That is absolutely imperative, and it ought to be your one of, at least among the very few topmost priorities. If you are someone who cares about software freedom, the school should be among the very top priorities for you. Because the schools really are that important. Talking to the crowds and promoting in general the use of software freedom, free software, is of course always going to be a good thing still, but what perpetuates the status quo and which promotes the use of proprietary software is the school. You see, for every few people you convince to use some free software operating system, there is a whole government institution imposing the use of a proprietary operating system on thousands and thousands of people. So that is a system that fights against your goal. So for that reason alone, fixing the system ought to be a higher priority than just talking to the crowd. Because even if you convince a few people in the crowd to switch to GNU plus Linux, there's still a government that forces all the people to use Windows or any other proprietary operating system. It could be Mac OS or some Google's operating system, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter, it's irrelevant what operating system it is. As long as it's proprietary software, it's proprietary software. And proprietary software in any form is the problem. So, yeah, like I've now said a couple times, and I repeat this still because it's important. So, to emphasize, while talking to the crowds is still useful, it is still useful to convert people to the use of free software. For every few people you convert there, the government imposes it on many people, many more people. Fixing the government is a higher priority. Because the government, it is constantly, actively promoting the use of proprietary software. There are powerful forces at play promoting the use of proprietary software. Those are what perpetuate it. The reason the crowds use the proprietary software operating systems in the first place is because the government institutions perpetuate it. As in schools. If schools did not perpetuate the use of proprietary operating systems, there would be very small of a chance, way smaller of a chance that those crowds would use proprietary software in the first place. At least it wouldn't be perpetuated like that, even if there was some inertia from back when it was still promoted. That would last a while, but then eventually, when the governments decide to only promote free Libre software in the schools, the proprietary software will start to fade away over time, as the people are no longer exposed to those things in the school. When the school no longer requires the use of a proprietary operating system, but instead requires the use of a free Libre operating system, at least in the premises of the school, whatever the people do in their life outside of school is of course up to them, but when they are no longer being forced to use a proprietary operating system or any other proprietary software, they will no longer have the incentive to use it like they would have before. So, and less people will be exposed to those proprietary systems in the first place, because people are not born with the desire to use a specific operating system. Those things are enforced on them by the society around them, of course. Little children who go to school, they don't have any opinions on any operating systems. They don't care about such things, and they don't have any reasons to use one or the other. So it is therefore absolutely essential that the school not force the use of proprietary software on those children. But it doesn't have to be just children. It is any level of education. All levels of education. They are all schools, and they all have the same social purpose in a society. It is to promote the spirit of the goodwill and the culture of sharing knowledge and information and skills and all that sort of thing. So it is absolutely imperative, therefore, to target the schools. You need to do everything you can, anything you can think of. Be creative, figure out all the ways you could try to talk to the schools and make them use free Libre software. That is what's important. One big source the proprietors get people to use their software, new customers, be schools, because the companies, they know that because the students don't have a choice, if they can make the schools use their software, they get a bunch of new customers from those students. And that is really awful. That sort of a behavior should not be acceptable, it should not be tolerated. The government should make laws that require the schools exclusively to use free Libre software. And the rule should be absolute. It should be universal, as in it applies to all schools, every level of education and every kind of school. There is no room for proprietary software in any school. So it has to be. And that's it for this speech. Thanks for listening. Until next time. Bye.